Hello, welcome to Livingbridge's Spotlight series on inspirational female leaders in our portfolio businesses. My name is Ruby Byring and I'm the head of talent. Joining us today is Danuta Gray, chair at North. Danuta, welcome. Lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you, Ruby. It's nice to see you.
Danuta, you've had a phenomenal career. Having held several roles with BT, you became the CEO at Telefonica O2, which you held for 9 years before becoming the chair of that business. Your subsequent plural career has spanned a number of industries, including financial services with Old Mutual and Aldermore, gaming with Paddy Power, and staffing with Michael Page, all through times of quite significant transformation. Today, you chair the board of Direct Line, are a member at the board of Burberry, and have recently taken the chair role at one of our portfolio businesses, North, which is an IoT service provider. I just wondered how you think about your career and what drew you to the industries that you chose.
Yes, so I started my career in technology. I did physics at university, and then I did IT and engineering. So throughout my career, I've always at the heart of it, being interested in businesses where technology is having an impact. It's either changing, it's disrupting, and it's a voice that I would tend to have at a board table. So that's always been a constant. Is there something about that organisation where they believe in the power of technology to make a difference and that they're actually doing something around that? So that's one dimension. I think the second is that I've always loved being in businesses that are genuinely focused on their customer. So a lot of consumer businesses, not all consumer, but where they have to have a genuine passion and desire to really understand what their customers want, what their needs are, go from insights to think about products and services that they deliver, and then go all out to deliver excellent customer service. Because I think if you don't have that, then you're not at the front line of really understanding how customers are changing their needs, their patterns of behaviour. And then the final thing then is about culture and people. So working with organisations where they have a culture of openness, transparency, genuine desire to find really talented people and help develop them to fulfil their potential. And one, frankly, where they're open to people like me coming in and asking questions. So those are kind of like my triangle of assessment. As for sector, I'm a bit of a magpie, so I'm quite curious about lots of different sectors, and that's why I was on an airline and then a gaming business and then financial services. At the end of the day, my experience is that once you get under the language of a business and how it operates, there are common themes across businesses around their strategic clarity, around technology, around other aspects of doing business that you can apply your knowledge and experience to. So if someone rings me up, I will do the triangle test. And if they fit the triangle test, then I'll worry about the sector somewhat afterwards. But there does have to be an interest around the sector, but it isn't the thing that I go for first. I go for the other dimensions first.
Yeah, fascinating. Danuta, you've been in industries where, and actually starting out in technology, which is really interesting at a time where there are probably very few women in the industry. I'm really curious to understand the sort of challenges you faced when you were developing your career. I would imagine that that's quite a different set of challenges to today.
Yeah, look, when I started, I'm very old now. So when I started my career, even when I was at university, I could typically be the only woman in a room. So I remember going to engineering lectures and statistics lectures way back doing the physics degree when I was literally, I think there were 2 of us in a class of 120 doing stats. So it wasn't unusual. So I didn't sort of see that as unusual. In technology and IT, very much unusual to see women, and sadly to this day still, in my opinion, far too few women go into tech careers. So I think one of the things I'd learned over the years is you have to find your voice. And I think that applies for women if they're in a minority on a team or in a business. But I think it applies to other people who aren't, if you like, in the majority of the group that are around the table. And so you have to kind of find your voice. You have to find a way in. You have to find a way to speak up and contribute. And so it probably gave me some tougher edges in the early days that maybe, you know, I've learned to live with over time. I think the other thing I had challenges is, how do you fit in if you're not one of the gang? And again, in the early days, I would try to pretend to be fascinated by golf and football. It became exhausting, and I realized that didn't actually help me in my career. So I kind of moved on from that phase. So there are certain challenges about fitting in. I think the other challenges were actually self-created, Ruby. I think a lot about self-doubt. I can't do this, I can't do that. And over the years have learned to, it's not that you doubt yourself, it's just that you have to sort of knock yourself around the head a bit and go, well, look, you can do that equally as well as someone else can. You may not know of something, go and find out about it, and sort of kind of calm that inner voice of self-doubt and move that out of the way so that you then go in and find the voice to ask for opportunity. And I think the final challenge as a working mum was this whole concept of balance, you know, work-life balance, family. I learned that balance is compromise, and what you have to do is accept compromise and consciously choose. If you want to have a career, that means you will have to make compromises and choices. Then do that consciously. Don't try and be perfect in every area of your life, because you'll fail and feel guilty about it. So those are the sort of challenges that I would articulate, as opposed to outright sexism. Frankly, if somebody's been sexist along the way, I probably just either ignored it or not noticed it and just marched on.
I think it's such good advice in some ways, Danuta, that you know, actually it's about finding that balance within yourself and accepting the compromises. I think so few people really, you know, think of it that way, and sometimes let the inner voices take over. So that's a great piece of advice. Did you find along your journey, Danuta, because you have had such a great, you know, sort of journey, especially through technology companies, where I'm curious about whether or not other people or situations inspired you and motivated you, and why, to pursue, you know, the avenue that you did.
Yeah, it's a bit like asking the question of role models. And I've always slightly struggled with that, because to me, it's not about sort of emulating someone else, but I think so there's a lady called Dame Steve Shirley, who I every now and again I sort of read about her, and she to me is a phenomenal individual. If people listening haven't heard of her, they should look her up. I mean, she was a kinder transport child from Eastern Europe in the Second World War. She created a tech company herself back in probably the 70s and 80s. She only employed women who were working from home back then to provide software and support for other organizations. She did a fantastic job, did really, really well, and then went on to do a huge amount of philanthropy. She had a son with autism, and I mean, just an incredible lady. She's still going strong. She's still full of energy. And she really made the charge for women, particularly in technology, but just for women as a woman entrepreneur, and made a difference. People like Anita Roddick, again, younger people won't remember. I thought she was incredible. She did The Body Shop. She did sustainability decades before anyone else did, and, forged a path. So those would be the kinds of people that would have been inspirational. And I sort of think, well, what was it that was inspirational about them? They were clear. They had a purpose. They strove for it. They didn't take no for an answer, but they still retained that authentic self of who they were. They were quite unusual characters, but remained that throughout. So those were the kinds of people that would have inspired me.
It's amazing that that set of values really stays with you, and then sort of helps you drive some of the decisions around your career and how you want to be perceived. But fascinating journey. Danuta, just in terms of changes in leadership expectations, and referencing some of the sort of early groundbreaking women that actually led those industries, from what you the experiences that you've had, sort of from when you were a CEO to the CEOs that you work with now as a chair, Have you seen a change in leadership expectations and the motivations behind those CEOs?
So I think there is, the landscape within which we operate now is, in my view, the pace of change is definitely the fastest I've ever seen it. I think the degree of complexity that people are dealing with is hugely different compared with 20, 30 years ago. I think one of the other dimensions that's changed, and in my view, good CEOs did it quite naturally, but I think it's now an expectation, is this concept of creating value for shareholders now being about stakeholders. And when you go from just a shareholder lens to a stakeholder lens, then the stakeholder brings in aspects such as sustainability, your impact on the climate, the culture in an organization and the people within it. And I think that's now something that is expected of CEOs, as opposed to some CEOs did it, not everyone did it, if you go back in a period of time. So those are the different expectations I see. But there are some constants as well, in my view, of what good CEOs should do. I think one is create that culture in which it's performance management driven, but it's also very conscious about creating an environment in which you can attract the very best talent, that you develop and you retain them. And that's, performance management sometimes can get mixed in for frankly holding to account through fear. That is not a culture in which you attract the best talent and promote it and retain it. So it's that kind of magic of having both sides of that equation. I think decision making is always there. Delivery is always there. And I always look for a couple of factors in CEOs as well when I'm sitting in a chair role is, first of all, do they have that ability to simplify the complex? Can they bring strategic clarity to their thinking, which enables them to really focus on the most important things for the organization and therefore clarify for their teams and their organization what they should be focused on, as opposed to doing the opposite? It's amazing how some people can make the simple complex and confuse and not have that focus. And I think the other factor for me is curiosity. Because the world is changing around us so rapidly, even technology, the core principles underneath technology remain the same, but its ability and how it impacts on our businesses and our models and how we can disrupt, that changes quite dramatically and at quite a pace. So CEOs have to remain curious and develop themselves, and therefore remain curious about what kind of teams they should have around them. Because you can have a brilliant team, but it may just suddenly overnight no longer be the best team for you at that point in time. Doesn't mean people are bad, it's just times have changed. And it's that curiosity, I think, is for me, is a really critical factor to look for. Because when I see those types of combinations of characteristics, more often than not, that's a great CEO as opposed to a good enough one.
It's a brilliant list, Danuta, and I think we see that a lot in the great founders that we have in our businesses, and then subsequently, go on to build phenomenal businesses. So it's amazing that like a small set of skills demonstrated really well and combined can produce such phenomenal results. Danuta, I'd love to hear your advice that you would give to ambitious women on their career development as leaders, especially in today's ever-changing, very quickly changing world.
So sort of, it's kind of link back to some of the other things that I said. So first of all, find your voice. As a young woman, and I still see it in younger women today, is that just speak up. Your contribution is valuable. Don't try and perfect the contribution before you speak up. Say what you're thinking, say what's on your mind, ask for opportunities, ask for development. That ability to find your voice, it's a bit like a muscle. Once you've found it, you can practice it. But if you never find it, then why will you be surprised? Doing a brilliant job is fab, but it doesn't mean that people are going to notice you for it. So you also have to learn how to ask for the development chance. That's one piece of advice I would give. The second piece of advice is, I've always found that in life that if you run towards disruption and change or high growth, typically those are situations in which there is more to do than there are people to do it. And in those situations, you're more likely to get given opportunities that may make you uncomfortable. They may put you into situations that you've not experienced before. That's when you learn the fastest, and that's when you gain great experience, which will take you on into leadership roles. So I definitely do that. And I think the third piece of advice is just keep being personally curious and developing yourself. So that could be your own self-awareness, to know how you are and how you impact on others, and thinking about your own behaviours, or it can be to do with sustainability or technology. Remain curious and remain at the forefront. We can all continue to learn. To this day, I still attend conferences and listen to brilliant people, whether it's founders or economists, or just because you see patterns, you learn things, and you can bring them back to what you're trying to achieve in whatever you're working on. And it will add a perspective that maybe other people who aren't quite so curious, who don't develop themselves, won't do. And it helps you stand out. It helps you get given the opportunity to learn and grow and move on in an organization. So those are the kind of snippets of things. And then don't beat yourself up if you can't be the perfect person. None of us are perfect. If you have kids, you might not be there for all the school events. Get someone to film it, and just be kind to yourself, be tough on yourself, but be kind to yourself at the same time. Do things consciously, make those choices, and then find your own path.
Danuta, brilliant words of wisdom. Thank you so much. That's all the questions I have for you today, and I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Ruby. Nice to see you. Nice to be part of the Livingbridge family, by the way. Great organisation.
We're super pleased to have you. Thank you.